You make wimpy look skimpy.
Well, you see, I'm fat and you're ugly, but I can diet.
For more than 30 years, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson at the helm was the most watched late-night program in America. Every night, millions of viewers turned on their TVs for the laughter, the charm, and the sense of familiarity Carson brought. A safe place to land after a long day. But not every night went smoothly. Behind that iconic desk were moments when guests drifted off script, crossed invisible lines, or slipped completely out of control, forcing Johnny Carson to improvise live, with no safety net. And today, we're looking back at 10 guests who pushed Johnny Carson to his limits during his legendary run on The Tonight Show. Number 1. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was never a predictable guest. The British actor was infamous for his wild image, heavy drinking, and impulsive behavior off-screen. But during his notorious appearance on The Tonight Show in 1975, Reed turned what should have been a late-night conversation into a genuinely dangerous moment on national television. From the very beginning, Reed was visibly drunk. At first, it was just slurred answers and slightly off-topic remarks. Awkward, but not yet alarming. Then his voice grew louder. He stopped engaging in conversation and began overpowering the studio itself. He interrupted Carson, talked over him, laughed uncontrollably, and then, without warning, turned serious. A shift that left the audience unsure whether this was still a joke at all. The moment things crossed from uncomfortable into truly disturbing was when Reed's body language changed. He suddenly stood up, moved erratically, no longer treating the stage as a place for conversation, but something else entirely. At that point, Johnny Carson stopped playing along. The humor disappeared. He cut Reed off and took control of the show with a firmness rarely seen from him. And the moment the cameras stopped rolling, a decision was made immediately. Oliver Reed would never be invited back to The Tonight Show. That appearance became a chilling warning in American television history. Not every drunken spectacle can be turned into entertainment, and there are lines that even Johnny Carson, famous for his patience, would never allow anyone to cross. Number 2. John Lennon. John Lennon was one of the most anticipated guests ever to appear on The Tonight Show. A music legend, a global cultural icon, and also a figure American television treated with extreme caution. During his 1971 appearance, Lennon turned what should have been a harmless late-night interview into a moment that kept Johnny Carson on edge every single minute. From the moment the interview began, the atmosphere felt different. Lennon repeatedly steered the conversation away from entertainment. His answers were short, calm, and measured, but loaded with unmistakable undertones about war, power, and resistance. Every time Lennon spoke, an uncomfortable silence settled over the studio. No one knew whether this was still a talk show, or on the verge of becoming a political statement broadcast nationwide. The tension didn't come from Lennon himself. It came from the risk of crossing a line. Johnny Carson understood this perfectly. If the conversation drifted even a little further, the show could step beyond what network television would allow. So Carson constantly adjusted the rhythm, redirecting questions toward music, personal life, everyday details, as if pulling the show back down to solid ground. Unlike nights when he had to rescue the broadcast from drunken chaos or outright disorder, this time, Carson had to maintain absolute balance. He refused to let The Tonight Show turn into an uncontrolled political platform. The interview ended cleanly. No cuts, no public incident. Yet the tension lingered until the very last second. John Lennon's appearance didn't become legendary because of scandal, but because it revealed a more dangerous kind of moment, when everything appears calm, yet one wrong question could push the entire show past a point of no return. And that night, Johnny Carson did what he did best, keeping television steady through quiet, total control. Number 3. Truman Capote. Truman Capote had once been a beloved guest on The Tonight Show, a literary genius with razor-sharp wit, biting humor, and undeniable charm. But during his infamous appearance in 1980, Capote turned a late-night conversation into one of the most uncomfortable moments in the show's history. From the moment he walked onto the stage, something was wrong. Capote staggered, needing a few seconds just to sit down. This wasn't his familiar eccentricity. It was the unmistakable sign of someone no longer fully present. Once the interview began, things unraveled quickly. His speech was slurred, stretched thin, often impossible to understand. Sentences started, and then simply fell apart halfway through. The camera kept cutting to Johnny Carson's face, a man clearly struggling to keep the show from derailing. For one of the rare times in his career, Carson's smile looked forced. His questions became shorter, simpler, reduced to the bare minimum. This was no longer an interview. It was damage control. What angered Carson wasn't just that Capote was intoxicated. It was the blatant disrespect toward the audience and the show itself. The segment ended early. No explanation, no acknowledgement. And the moment the cameras stopped rolling, Carson made a firm decision. Truman Capote would never be invited back to The Tonight Show. That appearance became a dark legend in American television history. Not because it was funny, not because it was rebellious, but because of the chilling realization that viewers were watching a genius collapse in real time. And it marked a boundary that even Johnny Carson could not and would not allow to be crossed. Number 4. George Carlin. George Carlin was a rare case where intoxication didn't derail the show. It became part of the rhythm. Throughout his frequent appearances on The Tonight Show, in the 1,970 seconds, Carlin never hid his relationship with marijuana. The slightly glazed eyes, the slow smile, the unhurried cadence, all of it gradually became his trademark. The audience noticed immediately, and so did Johnny Carson. Carlin walked out just high enough to feel different, but still clear-headed enough to stay in control. He spoke less than before, but when he did, his words cut deeper. Ideas unfolded along unexpected detours, and then suddenly landed right on target. The studio didn't tense up, it quieted down. Carson understood the game and adjusted his hosting style accordingly. Fewer interruptions, more open-ended questions, allowing Carlin to guide the audience through his own stream of thought. What's especially telling is the boundary Carson set. Despite appearing more than 100 times, Carlin was never chosen as a guest host. Not because he lacked talent, but because Carson knew exactly where the line was. Carlin could be trusted in the guest's chair, but not with the weight of the entire show. It was conditional acceptance, tolerant, but fully aware. And that awareness is what separates Carlin from the other incidents. There were no emergency cutaways, no forced smiles, no backstage chaos, just an unspoken agreement between two men who understood television. As long as the show remained standing, the intoxication was allowed to exist. Number 5. Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in the early 1,970 seconds, and he quickly became one of the most uncomfortable guests Carson ever had. Not because he was drunk or high, but because he refused to cooperate on live television. From the very start of the interview, Grodin didn't respond in the expected way. His answers were short, abrupt, sometimes evasive. At moments, he simply stayed silent, long pauses hanging in the air even after Carson had clearly set him up with a question. The rhythm of the show, built on quick reactions and laughter, came to a complete stop. Things grew tense when it became clear that Grodin was rejecting every unspoken rule of a talk show. He wouldn't expand on stories. He wouldn't play along with Carson's jokes. He made no effort to move the conversation forward. For live late-night television, this was dangerous territory. There was no chaos to manage. But there was also nothing to work with. Charles Grodin's appearance is remembered as a uniquely unsettling moment in The Tonight Show's history. A night when a completely sober guest caused more strain for Johnny Carson than any drunk or drugged guest ever had. It proved something unsettling about live television. Deliberate non-cooperation can be more dangerous than outright disorder. Number 6. Peter Fonda. Peter Fonda didn't walk on to The Tonight Show as a troublemaker. He walked on as someone who was somewhere else entirely. In 1970, with the counterculture movement still burning hot, Fonda appeared on national television carrying the full spirit of that era. Off-rhythm, unfocused, and completely out of sync with the structure of a traditional talk show. From the very first moments, the conversation drifted off course. Fonda wasn't drunk, he wasn't loud, He wasn't hostile. He was simply slower than reality. His gaze lingered too long on the studio lights, then shifted to his own hands, staring as if he had just discovered something only he could see. When Johnny Carson asked a question, Fonda didn't answer right away. And when he did, it was often a response to a question asked 30 seconds earlier. Things turned truly strange when the conversation veered into time travel, cosmic consciousness, and the non-linear nature of reality, topics utterly foreign to a late-night television audience. The studio fell into a curious silence. No one knew whether to laugh, applaud, or simply listen. This wasn't comedy. It wasn't debate. It felt more like watching a stream of consciousness drifting with no destination. Johnny Carson quickly realized this wasn't something humor could fix. He switched to the shortest questions possible, kept his voice calm, and signaled for the segment to end after just a few minutes, far earlier than planned. No explanation, no apology. When the show returned from commercial, Peter Fonda was gone, as if he had never been there at all. What's notable is that Carson wasn't angry. There was no ban, no public fallout. He treated it simply as an unfortunate night, a moment when the counterculture had drifted too far into the space of network television. Number 7. Janis Joplin. Janis Joplin appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in 1970, just a few months before her death. By then, Janis was already a towering music icon, but also a person at the most fragile point of her life. And that fragility is what made this appearance one of the most emotionally tense moments Carson ever faced, even without any loud or chaotic incident. From the moment Janis stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere shifted. She was clearly drunk, not out of control, but enough that her famously raspy voice sounded looser, unanchored. She laughed loudly, spoke quickly, then suddenly slowed down, as if her emotions were changing direction mid-sentence. Her answers weren't completely off topic, but they lacked stability, leaving the audience unsure whether to laugh along or stay silent. The tension didn't come from her behavior. It came from how exposed she was. Janis revealed real cracks: exhaustion, loneliness, vulnerability. Johnny Carson sensed it almost immediately. He slowed the pace of his questions, avoided topics that might push her into emotional danger, and kept his voice low and steady, unusually restrained, rarely joking. Gradually, the studio grew quiet. This was no longer a typical late-night conversation. It felt like watching someone standing dangerously close to the edge, live, on national television. Number 8. Cheech and Chong. Cheech and Chong didn't bring an incident to The Tonight Show. They brought an obvious truth that everyone could see, but no one usually said out loud. From the moment they walked on stage, there was nothing to hide. Their intoxication wasn't an accident. It was the identity. And that's exactly what made Johnny Carson's usual damage control instincts unnecessary. There were no stumbles, no slurred speech, no loss of control. Instead, there was deliberate wandering. Chong would start telling a story as if it had no intention of ever ending, looping through unnecessary details, pausing in strange silences, then veering off in a completely different direction. At first, the audience waited for the point. Then they realized the lack of a point was the point. The story didn't need a destination. The drifting itself was the performance. Johnny Carson caught on quickly. He didn't set up guardrails. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to rescue the segment. Instead, he played the role of the straight, almost innocent host, asking overly sincere questions in response to painfully obvious innuendo. Sometimes he'd just raise an eyebrow, or glance at the camera, a quiet wink to the audience that said, "Yes, we all know exactly what's happening here." And that shared understanding was the joke. Because of that, the studio never tensed up. No one worried about the show falling apart, because Cheech and Chong never crossed the line. They weren't aggressive. They weren't detached from reality. They were simply themselves, openly and consistently. With them, Carson didn't need to control the moment. He only needed to let it move at its own pace. Cheech and Chong's appearances became rare proof that on The Tonight Show, intoxication could be tolerated, as long as it was honest, contained, and harmless. Not a dangerous night, not a disaster to forget, but a moment of television where the boundaries loosened, and everyone in the room agreed to play by rules they all understood. Number 9. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in 1974, at a time when he was still one of the most beloved all-around entertainers in America. But that night wasn't tense because of scandal or conflict. It was tense because Sammy's energy pushed beyond the familiar limits of late-night television. The moment he sat down, Carson sensed something was different. Sammy spoke faster than usual, barely pausing to breathe. His eyes darted constantly around the studio, his body unable to stay still, sweat slowly forming under the hot stage lights. To viewers at home, it may have looked like classic Sammy Davis Jr. Vibrant, electric, unstoppable. But inside the studio, it felt like something harder to contain. Johnny Carson understood that immediately and adjusted on the fly. He gave Sammy room to explode, to perform, to ride that wave of energy. But he kept stepping in with short, perfectly timed prompts. Not to interrupt, but to anchor the show. Like guideposts keeping the broadcast from drifting off schedule. Sammy Davis Jr.'s 1,974 appearance is remembered not for disaster, but for how close it came to the edge. It was a night balanced delicately between brilliance and overload. Not a dangerous intoxication, but a talent amplified to its absolute maximum. And with his trademark calm, Johnny Carson did what he always did best. He kept The Tonight Show standing steady, even as the energy on stage threatened to spill over. Number 10. Rip Taylor. Rip Taylor walked onto The Tonight Show like a firework that had already been lit. In his appearances throughout the 1,970 seconds, he brought a very different kind of chaos, one that forced Johnny Carson to stay alert every single second. The trouble started almost immediately. Just a few lines into the interview, Rip suddenly began throwing confetti and streamers across the stage. The carefully controlled set vanished in seconds. Paper flew through the air, blocked camera lenses, landed on Carson's desk, tangled around microphones. The audience roared with laughter, but backstage, no one was laughing. This was no longer a conversation. It was a set being taken over. Johnny Carson instantly saw the risk. Confetti made it hard for cameras to frame shots. Sound quality suffered. And worse, the rhythm of the show was slipping dangerously close to chaos. Carson didn't cut to commercial, but he tightened control. He interrupted more than usual. He shortened questions. He steered the segment firmly toward an early ending before the spectacle could spiral any further. Rip Taylor's appearance is remembered as another hard-earned lesson from The Tonight Show. Sometimes, it doesn't take drunkenness or drugs to lose control on live television. Sometimes, all it takes is a performance pushed just a little too far.